you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion. For the sake of the world, this delusion. It's gotta go.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We're live. It's February 9th, 2014. I'm at Dillahunty. This is Jen Peeples. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. You know, all things considered. You've been traveling. And
Yeah, finally glad to be home.
This is a live public access television program where we take calls from viewers, have discussions about, well, I don't know, God, religion, philosophy, you name it. Who knows what we'll end up discussing. After the show's over, as a reminder, some of the people involved get together and go to dinner, and currently we're going to Threadgill's again tonight, although the plan is that this will be the last week at Threadgill's. There won't be a show next week. There's something else going on at the studio, so you can ignore the schedule at atheist-experience.com or wherever we're posting the schedule. We'll have some more information up. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll probably be going somewhere else for dinner.
Yeah. The show, the studio closing next week is due to President's Day. So there's a sign on the front door. I didn't know that till I got here. But
I don't know why they have to be closed on Sunday for President's Day. But
I guess
having 3-day weekend.
Yeah, I guess we were disrupting their 3-day weekend. So
enjoy your 3-day weekend. It's all right. We were only going to disabuse about 1 million people of their beliefs on that particular Sunday, but I guess it'll have to wait a week. I don't know. Did you want to go with something to talk about at all, or you just want me to?
I have one thing to mention. As most people know, February is Black History Month, and 2 weeks from today, the fourth Sunday in February is always the Day of Solidarity with Black nonbelievers, and the ACA is participating in this event. So, 2 weeks from today, please come out and join us at any of our events, brunch. You come to the studio audience. You can come to the post-show dinner, whatever. We will be celebrating the Day of Solidarity with Black nonbelievers. Awesome. 2 weeks from today.
So normally, Jen would have some potential topic, or we just go into calls. I have a couple things I actually want to address. Some of them are kind of shameless schedule self-promotion, but I get to do that. So I've been doing a lot of debates lately, or some things that were labeled debates, which weren't necessarily. Next weekend, I'm doing 3 debates over the course of 3 nights at a church in San Antonio. Now, it's a fairly small church. I think they only fit around 300 or so, but they're having a 4-day conference, and there is some way to actually supposedly watch these debates live streamed. I don't have the details yet, but keep an eye on my Facebook, and maybe we'll get up a note at the webpage or something for those people who want to tune in. There's somebody who's probably going to call in to talk about a debate that I did on Friday with Ray Comfort on Christian Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So if that call comes in, we'll talk a little bit more about it. If not, just know that it wasn't a debate. And while I'm happy to maybe have conversations with Ray at some point in the future, there will be no more formal debates between me and Ray Comfort, because I actually prefer to have an opponent who wants to actually debate, instead of just showing up and saying, oh, I don't have any interest in convincing anybody that a God exists. I'm just here to preach and tell you you're going to hell and that I love you and would like to fix that. Yeah, that's not a debate.
I like that whole "you're going to hell and I love you" thing.
Yeah, and you also love the guy that's sending me to hell. Which, is kind of cool. But also on Friday morning, I recorded 2 hours of a podcast. I think it's called Unbelievable, that airs on Christian radio in the UK on Saturday afternoons. It was a 2-part debate, and I've forgotten my opponent's name. It's David Robinson, something like that. He's a Scottish minister, and in the first part, he explained why he's not an atheist, and I, questioned him, and we debated that topic a little bit. And then the second part, I explained why I'm not a Christian, and we debated that a little bit. And as always, we ran out of time. There's always more to talk about than there is time. Which brings me to a couple points about our show. One of the things that I need to clear up a little bit is the guest policy. Evidently, the guest policy was massively confusing for at least one person, perhaps some more, so maybe we'll reword it. But for clarity, the guest policy, where we announce that we're not interested in people who have promoting theism as their primary purpose, that guest policy is about being an in-studio guest. We thought that this would be clear since the entire premise of the show is to have people who want to promote theism call in and have discussions. Yeah. And so this in-studio guest policy was put in place because you can have your own shows. But it wasn't, it didn't have anything to do with callers. So maybe we'll reword that just a little bit. But Cy Ten Bergengate and I have had this kind of back and forth over the past week, which is kind of amusing. Now he's claiming that I lied and or suggesting that I'm a liar by selectively reading from an email and then. But anyway, one of his concerns is that he didn't think he'd be treated fairly. And when I said this, he said, "That's not what my objection was. I just figured you'd hang up on me." What the hell did you think I meant by not being treated fairly? I know what your objection is. You think that I'd hang up on you. So let me talk a little bit about how and why I hang up on people. And by the way, I'm not the only person here. Matter of fact, I'm gone quite a lot, so there are other people you could call in and talk to. I hang up on people when they're debating dishonestly, when they start repeating points, when they fail to acknowledge points and just simply move on to one other thing, when the conversation becomes completely non-productive, and when I have no hope that this is going to go anywhere or be beneficial to anybody. That's why. And so if Cy thinks that he's likely to be hung up on, I think he's saying that he's either going to argue dishonestly or have an unproductive conversation, et cetera. Because if you take a look at it, our show's kind of unusual. I don't think you can find another call-in show, maybe not anywhere in the world, on any media, that allows the callers to speak as much as our show does. I mean, usually if you call into a radio show, you ask your question, they disconnect you, and then they talk about it after you hang up on the air. And barring interviews and guests and stuff, that's about it for call-in shows. On the contrary, we have callers all the time, some of whom have taken up entire shows, and not just apologists like Matt Slick or Ray Comfort, who, by the way, Ray seemed to think he was treated entirely fairly on the show. And if Cy's real concern was that he'd be treated unfairly or that we would hang up on him in a dishonest fashion rather than because he deserves it, then it seems to me the solution would have been to call in, get hung up on, and then present that actual evidence of us being dishonest in hanging up on it, instead of just presuming that that's the case. But when you're talking to a presuppositionalist, presuming that that's the case is their entire way of life. So I guess on that note, we'll go on and start taking some calls.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Dale in Longmont, Colorado, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Matt?
Pretty good.
Hey, I'm a historian with a bachelor's degree.
You're kind of breaking up where it's really difficult for us to hear. So I don't know if you're listening to the stream. If so, you'll want to turn that off. By the way, it's true for anybody who calls. If you're calling and you're listening to the stream, turn off the computer and your stream and whatever else. Let's try again. Let's see if we can adjust that level.
I have the phone turned down, but bad connection. It's really fuzzy. Can you hear me now?
We can hear we can hear you, and then you're muffled, and then we hear you and you're muffled. It's really difficult.
I have to get. Is that better?
Just go ahead and start talking. We'll see if we can suss this out.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
So far. Go ahead, talk.
Okay. Hey, I have a different biblical interpretation of the Bible. I've been really outspoken with my views in my young life, and I'm having a problem with people walking around saying that they are of the Church of Dale.
You're having a problem with what?
People saying that they're of the Church of Dale. I believe you've actually been contacted by someone talking about this.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Dale.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you guys have the notes that the operator took down?
Yeah, the notes that I have are, what do we think about free will? Your cousin is a physicist. Does this make sense? And do you believe in an entropic or anti-entropic something? I don't know.
Anti-entropic universe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as far as I can tell, and as far as the information demonstrates, entropy is increasing. Other than that, I don't know what you're talking about.
You don't see evolution as a vehicle for anti-entropy?
No.
No.
How so?
I think.
Do you defend that position?
I think living organisms generate so much entropy just by living that, second law is not violated.
What about our ability to organize the universe through technology?
How is that in any way relevant?
Well, the other thing is, as we organize the universe, what I would presume you're talking about by organizing the universe, we are actually introducing as much or more entropy than we are organizing. This is why perpetual motion machines are impossible.
Yeah.
I have a disagreement with you on that, but I understand that yes, the concept of energy running wild and producing continual energy is impossible.
Sure.
Okay. So what is it that you understand about entropy? Tell us what you think you know about entropy.
A system that continually moves towards a more chaotic and more diffuse energy position.
Sure.
Okay, entropy actually doesn't have anything to do with order, disorder, chaos, or anything like that. That's actually a misinterpretation of it.
Would you explain it to me then?
Okay, it has to do with first of all, it's about a closed system. Okay, the second law of thermodynamics is a theoretical construct that concerns a closed system. Okay. When we talk about entropy increasing, that's actually about energy. Okay, it actually doesn't say anything about chaos or disorder. Okay, it's about the amount of energy that's lost to a system.
There's a colloquial understanding that is it tends towards disorder. But anyway, I don't know what your point is on this. I mean, you called in to ask us what our views were on entropy in the universe.
Matt, I'm just looking for a starting position. I don't really want to,
Well, so what is your question?
be really rude.
What is it?
I'm just trying to figure out what's the point. Because what my personal understanding or position is on the universe and entropy, I don't know how that's relevant to the show.
I think it's important for the teaching of the youth that we teach an entropic universe and in schooling, and this is a problem in my perspective because it puts a philosophy in the minds of the youth that the product of the universe is almost meaningless or chaotic or destructive, and that nothing they do has any meaning.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Entropy has nothing to do with that. It doesn't assign meaning to anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got something you object to, and you're objecting on grounds that I don't see. I don't understand. I don't even understand what your point is, because you seem to object to something that we're teaching, which is established science, which, by the way, if it's wrong, you need to demonstrate it's wrong and take it up with scientists, not a local public access show. But this inference that you think people are drawing from it, which is incorrect, I don't necessarily see that that's the truth. And when I say that, I don't mean I don't think that people are necessarily drawing the inference that you think they're drawing, and I don't think that there's any rational grounds on which to draw that inference. So I'm still left wondering what your point is.
Well, from my understanding, by nature, the understanding that we have of science is incomplete. The science that we use at the moment is simply the best that we have seen so far.
Sure.
And I think it is important that we look at the possibility of that evolution, technology combined and working with each other could produce a system of greater energy than we can perceive in the universe at our current level of scientific detection.
So, to me, what I heard was we shouldn't shut down the possibility that we could create a perpetual motion machine.
If you put several single atom, single molecule engines, which use their own atomic forces to create a small electronic charge, you could create a centrifugal force device that could pump out seemingly more energy than it's creating from its individual atomic structure atoms.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the word "seemingly" in there.
Yeah,
first of all,
prove it.
But in other words, the other thing which Jen just said is prove it. I mean, this is not a program where we're going to spend a lot of time with every hypothetical that somebody finds fascinating. It's just not part of the show. So I don't know what this has to do with anything we've ever discussed with regard to the existence of a God or religion.
Move on to something else.
Sorry?
Well, well, we can drop the issue and move on to something else.
Sure.
Well,
I could also just move on to another caller. I'm trying to get
Yeah.
you to a point so that we don't just waste time here.
Do so.
What's that?
I said that's your guys' choice if you wish to do so.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, bye.
So you can add that to the list of reasons that I'll hang up on people when they talk about nonsense for a while and suggest that it's okay if I do hang up.
Yeah. Have we ever gotten a caller that defended the idea of a perpetual motion machine?
Oh, I'm pretty sure somebody has at some point.
That's,
We've had callers that.
I'm sure that like.
There is nothing that we haven't had.
The guy talked about, we're teaching entropy in schools. Like, not very well, obviously.
Well, it's. I think there was one of the points that he made, which was kind of frustrating, was this idea that people are inferring that life is then meaningless.
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd necessarily tie this to an understanding or even a misunderstanding of entropy.
Yeah. How do you get from laws of thermodynamics to life is meaningless?
Now you could have tied that to what many theists will do, which is claim that atheists, because they don't believe in a God and don't believe in an afterlife, that therefore this life must end and then it's all meaningless. And then we could have an actual discussion about how that's just absurdly wrong. In fact, the models of religion that include an afterlife pretty much make this life meaningless.
Yeah.
It's a place to wipe your feet. Everything that happens here is, it's like dirty rags compared to eternal afterlife.
If you hold that view, then you're not actually living your life. You're just waiting to die, because the real deal is, what happens after.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why there were prohibitions against suicide, because people who had been taught these religious things would say, "Wow, wait a minute, I could just get onto the afterlife right now if I just kill myself." Oh, no, because if you kill yourself, you're playing God, and so God's going to punish you and send you to hell in that case.
Yeah.
So they kind of had to post hoc invent this rationalization for why you couldn't kill yourself. And then that's where we get to people like Andrea Yates, who kill their kids, basically sacrificing their eternal life to ensure that their kids, more than one of them in this case, get the better afterlife rather than risking their damnation, which, I have theists on occasion tell me that, that's not, no true Christian would ever do that. And I agree that I don't think most reasonable people would actually do that, but that's because I don't think they actually believe this. As a matter of doctrine, the natural extension of this doctrine, that seems to be a pretty sound action.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, I think so. Cool. We've got, it's coming up.
Right.
So Vijay in Columbus, Ohio, thanks for waiting.
Hey, Matt and Jen, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Thanks.
Good. I really enjoy your show, and I think you guys are doing a really good job, so keep doing what you're doing. I just had a quick question, and this thing really frustrates me with people's position on belief. And I was watching one of these shows called Big Questions on YouTube, and one of the panelists said that atheism, for the lack of a better word, atheism is the zero position. Like when a child is born into the world, you consider him or her to be an atheist, or not knowing that there's any God or anything like that. And theism comes after that. It almost seems like the current understanding is you are an atheist because you oppose theists as an after the fact. So
there's a distinction. There's a distinction between implicit atheism, which applies to babies and rocks and anything that hasn't actually processed the claim. That position of I have not yet accepted the claim, and then there's explicit atheism, which is what we tend to talk about, which is pretty much all of us who have evaluated the claim a God exists and rejected it. And by rejected it, every time I say that, somebody's like, "Oh, so you're claiming there isn't a God?" No, I reject that the claim has met its burden of proof. I do not believe the claim. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't believe it if you actually presented evidence. Of course I would. If a God actually demonstrated that it existed, I'd absolutely believe that God existed, and I'd no longer be an atheist. But that doesn't mean I'd actually worship that God, which is a separate issue.
Yeah, this whole idea about implicit atheism, the idea that we're born atheists and everything.
Yeah.
it's technically true, but it's almost a useless concept.
Okay.
And actually, Hemant Mehta from Friendly Atheist just posted a video the other day with 9 things that he thinks atheists should stop saying. And one of them was this babies are atheist things. Now, of the 9 things that he said we should stop saying, I disagreed on many of them, and I've made a post to Facebook outlining where I disagreed and why. I agree that we should probably stop saying this thing that babies are atheists, because there's clearly a distinction there.
I use the word atheist for the lack of a better word. I mean, there is no way to describe what that position is without using what word we use for a lack of belief as atheist. So that's the reason. I mean, I don't believe...
Yeah, that's the definition of it, so...
Okay.
So, I mean, your use of the word is correct.
Yeah, if you say that in the strictest definition, a baby doesn't believe and therefore is an atheist, I'll agree with you. I just find that particular point, it doesn't really have any value to it, because it's not very distinct from saying a rock is an atheist because a rock doesn't believe. The only distinction there is that you're presuming that a baby could believe. I'm not even convinced that that's possible, because I don't think that the ability to conceptualize at that level exists in infants, and we have pretty good reason to think that it absolutely doesn't. And Jen's actually talked about psychology as children grow and learn.
Actually, children don't have the cognitive ability to evaluate religious claims until they're actually quite a bit older.
It comes in with this theory of mind, or the theory of other minds that they develop. I think at 4 or 5 or something like that. That's when we start really seeing it.
Yeah, and actually,
I might be wrong on the date.
We don't even see the first, the first like glimmer of empathy doesn't even kick in until like 10 months, somewhere around there. It's when the frontal cortex starts to get myelinated. Until the frontal cortex comes online, they don't really have the ability to even make these kinds of judgments. So,
okay.
Cool.
The ability to evaluate those claims is a fairly mature thing.
So it shows here, and I apologize because we're trying to move this along in a little quicker format, that you had a second question about whether there's a point to debating if people just believe out of fear.
Yeah, I guess that just picking up on what you said earlier today, and do you ever, like, deep down, do you ever think that there's a point to this debate in the sense, like, you're talking to people who believe, and in my opinion, I think they believe solely because of the fear and not any rational justification.
Well,
and just like you said, you hit a brick wall, and then you're not able to move past that. So in a sense, because when I was brought up in a Hindu family, but I mean we're not very orthodox or whatever. But there are certain things about things that my parents tell me to.
So did you believe things out of fear?
No, I mean I never really believed. I probably as young as maybe 11 or 12.
Even if we presume that you're correct, that people believe primarily out of fear, and I'm sure that's one motivation.
Yeah, sometimes people do.
People also change their mind and stop being fearful. And of course, debates are useful. You're not going to convince everybody all the time, but people change their mind, and people tend to change their mind, we would hope, for good reasons. But at least getting the information out there and demonstrating, if you've got a kid who believes there's monsters under the bed, that's a belief that is spawned by fear. Are you saying we shouldn't actually bother engaging with that child and talking about evidence and reason and using those tools to convince them that there's not a monster under the bed, that they have nothing to fear? I mean, that's the path out. And it's the only path out that puts them now on firm footing, because if you replace one fear with another, or replace one addiction with another, all you've done is basically shifted their belief to a new belief that's also on a bad foundation. So instead you expose the problematic foundation and give them the ability to create new beliefs based on firm foundations. That's the point of having the discussions and debates.
Yeah, and I would argue that when someone is very fearful, so they've accepted a claim because they're afraid of what happens if they don't believe it, I think that's the time when you really should actively engage them maybe not in debate, but in talking about what it is they actually believe and why they're fearful of it. And the reason I say this is because making decisions about almost anything when you're in a state of fear is a really terrible position to be in. You are not likely to make good decisions when you're in a state of fear. So, I think that talking people out of that, by presenting evidence to them, by showing them that, that you're not afraid, I think that's very worthwhile.
Okay. Well, I just sometimes feel like, some people are so fearful, and then you really cannot change their mind, and then we need to move forward. And is it our only way is to kind of steamroll our way into the future,
Well, the thing is,
that's the only thing. But it's not everybody. I'm not saying it's always the case, but it's just some of the situations I've encountered. I just say I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, and that's perfectly valid. If you sense that the conversation is going nowhere and that they really are not in a position where they can even evaluate any evidence you present to them, then maybe you do want to cut your losses and move on. I mean, you're not obligated to engage with everyone that's a believer, and I would actually recommend against that.
And this is actually another one of the points that Hemant had in the video of things atheists should stop saying, and that is that you can't reason people out of things that they didn't reason themselves in to begin with. And I agree with him wholeheartedly. I think, first of all, I think that if we're going to talk about reason in any meaningful sense, they did in fact reason themselves into those beliefs. You've reasoned yourself into everything you believe. You just had really bad reasons. And we tend to look at emotional arguments as if they're just fallacious. Well, no, we're emotional beings, and we have to temper our emotions, and we can use reason to do that. We can show that there's no good reason for you to be fearful. And actually, after we finish this, there's another call waiting where we're probably going to get to talk about whether or not debates, in fact, are a waste of time. So I appreciate the call, Vijay.
All right, thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks,
Great.
too.
Thanks.
Hey, Scott, thanks for waiting.
Hey, man, how are you?
I'm all right. I would imagine
Hi,
I
how are
was
you?
correct that we can probably talk about whether or not debates are a waste of time, can't we?
Sure, I'm so happy to be a guest on your show today.
Well, thanks for calling. And by the way, for those who don't know, Scott is a fan of the show who also listens to a Christian radio program or station in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and has become friendly with Paul Ridgway, who's the host of that. And he prompted Paul to have me on as a guest, and I did. And then there was a prompting for me to actually have a debate with Ray Comfort on Friday, this past Friday, from like 5 to 6 p.m. The podcast of that supposedly will be up in a few days. So if you didn't hear it live, there'll be a chance to another time. So thanks for doing that, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never had more beers during that debate in my life.
You never had more what?
No more beers in my life.
Oh, it turned it into a drinking game.
Oh my gosh, it was like listening to a telemarketer.
Yes.
It was trying to stick to a script, and I know that you're not, email back and forth, but I don't want to words.
So let me address the point that I said we get to, just so we don't go past it. For those who don't know or haven't heard yet, this was not a debate. I said so during it. I was live tweeting. It was a frustrating mess because ostensibly we were there to have a debate on whether or not God exists, and I was there to present the reasons why I don't accept that claim. And Ray was brought in to defend the idea that a God exists. And right from the beginning, he just flatly said that he had no interest in proving to anybody that a God exists, and that his primary concern was to let me know that I had injured my Creator and that I was destined to hell. And so most of his time talking was spent preaching instead of actually addressing the debate topic. And when it came time for the questions back and forth, Ray kind of tended to avoid addressing the actual question and instead engaged in more sermonizing. And I know that he's posted on his blog or somewhere that I'm angry at him because he preached the gospel, which is a really incredibly dishonest way to frame why I was angry. Preach the gospel all you want, Ray. I don't object to you preaching. And you could actually preach during the course of a debate. Many good debaters actually do that. but don't agree to do a debate on a topic and then walk in and say, oh, I don't have any interest in demonstrating this. I only came here to let you know that you're going to hell and that I love you and I'd like to save you from that. Because there were many people who immediately looked at this as a waste of time. And there are also many people who have claimed that Ray is dishonest and that he's only in this for the money. And I want to hit both of those points real quick, and then I'll let you go, Scott, because these have been pissing me off for the last couple of days. Number one of the things that Ray repeatedly did was to say that he doesn't have to prove that God exists. He already knows that we all know this, and we're just denying it. So he's basically telling us that he knows what's in our minds and in our hearts, and that we are being dishonest. And when atheists run around saying that Ray doesn't believe this, what he's espousing, you're assuming his motivations. I don't know what your justification is for doing that. If Ray tells me he believes this, I got no reason to doubt him, because lots of people do. Well, nobody could hear this over and over again and just be that stupid. Yes, actually, they can. Well, you know, he's just in it for the money. Really? Prove it. I don't see him making a ton of money. I don't see him, and even if he was, I don't know that that's his motivation. You don't have to assume the motivations. You can just say that when it comes to debates, he's terrible, dishonest, and insulting, and is only interested in preaching, and that's enough. But whether this is a waste of time, absolutely not. Because on drive time radio from 5 to 6 p.m., on a Christian radio station in Minneapolis, St. Paul, I was allowed to come on and talk about why I don't accept these claims that a God exists. And the person that they brought on to debate me was an embarrassment. And every listener to that radio station had to sit through that and say, wow, I can't believe that this is the best they could. They managed to find the only apologist I know of who's a worse debater than Ken Ham. And this has just got to stick in people's craw and being embarrassing. I would have expected apology letters for having wasted my time, except that I didn't allow them to waste my time. I got my points across and moved on from there. But what did you want to say about it, Scott?
Well, you know, it's funny. I did talk to Paul after, and Paul's a very fundamentalist Christian, and he did admit that he claimed that Ray was not on his game, quote unquote.
Ray was exactly on his game.
Yeah,
he was on his script.
That is Ray's game.
Yeah.
Right, and he did admit that, and obviously in confidence. But I wanted to share something real quick, and I'll let you go. I know you got other callers.
Sure, go ahead.
I went to the University of Minnesota, and I was, having lunch, and they have these tables set up. And as I was walking back to my office, I saw there was a table that said heaven and hell. I just kind of took a double take, and
that said what?
It had a table that said heaven or hell.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So I did a double take, and he said, do you want to answer some questions? I said, sure. He said, do you think you're going to heaven or hell? I said, I don't know. He says, why? I said, because I'm an atheist. And he says, oh, you're one of those people. Have you ever read the Bible? I said, sure. He says, why are you an atheist? I said, you can go do the whole Ray Comfort thing. And he said, can you give me an example? If you've claimed that you read the Bible, I said, Exodus 21. Thanks to you, Matt. Yeah. And he said, I don't know that verse. Can you tell me? I said, endorsing slavery, stoning my child. And basically, the long story short, he looked at me and says, you've given me a lot to think about.
That's great.
Oh, cool.
And it's a much better response than the glib response that I've done on occasion, that I've heard of people do, is when asked, have you ever read the Bible? I've said, and some other people have said, yes, have you ever read anything else? I mean, because there are some apologists who do look at the Bible as their manual for every possible answer, and it's the Word of God, and I don't need anything else. And I asked Ray a bunch of questions. One of the questions that I would like to have asked Ray, but I had a plan. I asked him basically, how do you tell which parts of the Bible are true or not? And of course, he said it was all true, even though on this show he said there's lots of parts of the Bible that he doesn't agree with. And so I'm wondering why he doesn't agree with them if he thinks they're true. But, when asked, how do you tell the difference between somebody who's having a delusional vision of an angel and someone who's having a real vision of an angel? And he spent a bunch of time talking about the Bible and then basically said, the Holy Spirit would let me know. And it was all, I put those questions together along with a few others to demonstrate his foundational epistemology. And by epistemology, I'm talking about the process that we use to discover whether a belief is reasonable. And he begins and ends, as Ken Ham does, with God. And this is just true. And so I have to necessarily be lying when I say I don't believe, because he knows by the inner witness of the Holy Spirit that I'm lying. Well, that is not an epistemology that you can use to serve as a foundation of anything. If you can't draw a distinction between these two things in a way that anybody else could use the same method to do, and he would say you could use the same method, but for some reason I can't. I don't have this inner witness of the Holy Spirit that he apparently has, no matter how hard I try.
Well, and I talked about this on the show, I think several years ago, but Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences published a paper, I think it was published in maybe 2009 or maybe 2010, that talks about putting people in an fMRI machine and seeing what parts of the brain light up when you talk to them about what they think, and then you ask them what somebody known to them thinks. So they have to project, what this other person would think about a particular issue. And then they talked about, what does your God think about a particular issue? And they try to use some controversial issues. And guess what part of the brain lights up when you talk about what God thinks? It's the part that corresponds to self. So this inner witness of the Holy Spirit is just what they think anyway.
Yeah.
And they interpret that as, this is God speaking to me.
It's a good kind of scientific investigation into why God tends to agree with people.
Yeah, why God always hates all the same people you do.
Yeah. And why my version of Christianity is the correct and true one.
Yes.
But yeah, so, I said during and after the debate that I won't be debating Ray Comfort again in any sort of formal public setting. If he calls in or we run into each other, it's not like I wouldn't talk to the guy. But I would prefer, if I'm actually going to do debates, to have an opponent who actually cares to debate the subject. Because, otherwise I might as well just go out and stand on the pier when he's street preaching and we can get into a pointless yelling match over how big of one of his first questions for me was, have I ever used the Lord's name in vain or as a curse word? And, I asked him, well, I need to know what the Lord's name was. Yeah. But, I'll admit to it, and I've admitted to it every time I'm asked. And my point is, okay, please demonstrate that this is, anything for me to be concerned about, because that's his goal. Ray's goal is to convince me that I have injured my Creator. That's what he said. And yet he has no interest in demonstrating that a Creator actually exists. And he said that as well. He doesn't have that as his goal to prove it. And as I mentioned in the closing, if you claim that there's an injured party, you have to actually demonstrate the injured party. Ray does not want to produce the corpse because he can't. And he acknowledges that as well. And so this is why, at some level, engaging with Ray in a formal debate is pointless because he doesn't want to debate. But it's also why I don't consider what I did on Friday to be a waste of time, because now all the Christians listening and everybody who listens to the podcast in the future will realize that Ray is not interested in debate.
Right.
So he can stop asking Dawkins to debate him, which is his little publicity stunt, pandering around, saying, oh, Richard Dawkins, I'd love you to debate me. No, you don't, Ray, because you don't have any interest in debating. What you'd really like is to pull yourself up by Dawkins' bootstraps, grab a hold of his audience so that you can preach more. This is a level of, and I can't even call it really dishonesty because you're upfront about your dishonesty, like a magician would be. I'm going to fool you into debating me so that I can do something else. Well, not fooling me anymore.
Well, I'll let you guys get to some calls, but thank you so much for taking my call today. I really appreciate it. I'll keep watching.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, man. Bye.
Jesus H. Christ, that must have been a frustrating
Yeah.
experience. And there I've
God
used
damn it.
the Lord's name in vain.
Well, yeah, when I asked
I've
him-
injured Jesus again.
Yeah, he didn't go to Jesus. When I asked him what was God's name
Yeah.
for me to use, he used as an example, like O-G-O-D is what came out of his mouth, something like that, where he had to spell out G-O-D. And I was like, wow, and he's big on this kick of capitalize God. Well, and don't say a God. Well, Ray, there are occasions where a God with a lowercase g is absolutely correct. You're so stuck in your little mindset that, oh, well, there's just the one God and we're going to capitalize it. Yes, but there's a whole plethora of ancient Greek gods.
There's Thor.
And I would capitalize Thor because that's a proper noun.
Yeah, and if Thor is not real, then why do we have Thursdays?
I know. Plus, I've seen the movies, or some of them. Anyway, he doesn't understand English or debate or science. Oh, the science thing. This was funny. Sorry for the people who might have wanted to listen to this. I'm going to save you a little bit extra time. He talked about his video evolution versus God or something, and how he said that he had interviewed our friend PZ Myers. Well, let me tell you, Ray, PZ's my friend, not our friend.
Yeah.
I can pretty much be pretty sure I'm speaking on his behalf to let you know that he's not your friend. But he said that these scientists could only come up with examples of speciation and adaptation, which we all accept. This is Ray saying this. But they couldn't come up with anything to confirm evolution. And as I pointed out in the closing, that is evolution, you dolt, and that's what every one of them has been trying to tell you for years. If you accept speciation and adaptation, congratulations, Ray, you accept evolution. Now we're done, and you can stop producing your little videos and trying to get 10 minutes of fame with whatever atheist you want to be taunting that day.
I suppose he's never heard of chromosome 2.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure he has.
Yeah.
But, that doesn't mean we were apes. No, it means we still are.
Yeah.
So, oops, I think I lost that one. Sylvester in Beaumont, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for waiting.
Oh, no problem.
Well, did you have a question for us?
Yes, I was going to ask you if you agree with the justice system in the United States. If you think, in comparison to other places in the world, do you think it's good, average, above average?
What does this have to do with atheism?
Also, we're hearing an echo.
I was going to go to my point because I'm dealing with justice, kind of.
Okay. So,
hang on, we're hearing an echo. Can you turn down whatever stream you're listening to?
Oh, okay.
When you ask us what we think about the justice system in the United States, that's such a broad topic, and I'm still hearing the echo.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you this. I called 2 weeks ago, and I believe, I don't remember who it was on the phone. I asked if all men were created equal, and the person I was speaking with said yes. I was like on the last 5 minutes on the show, I just asked the question.
Sure, so it depends on, I'm still hearing an echo. Here, I'll put you on hold. It depends on what you're actually meaning by were all men created equal, because first of all, I don't think we were created. We're not all men. But as a foundational principle of our justice system, the foundational principle is that all human beings should be considered equal in the eyes of the law, that we should strive to make sure that we are not preferencing some individuals over others without some sort of foundation. Now, if you're talking about it in a broader context, am I equal to Michael Jordan? Well, definitely not at basketball. I mean, that's just absurd. But the goal is for us supposed to be treated equally under the law. That the justice should be blind to, our ethnicity and our sexual preferences and orientation or whatever, anything like that, our religious beliefs. That as a foundation is something that I think is a good idea.
So my question was, what is the foundation built upon? Why do we treat our fellow human beings as equals?
Here's the simplest way to look at this, and it's called the veil of blindness. And it's about making sure that people are treated fairly. And so if you've got a cake, for example, and you want to divide it up equally among people, what you do is you have somebody cut the cake, letting them know that everybody's going to get a piece, but the person who cuts the cake gets last pick of the pieces. And that tends to make sure that because they don't know which piece they're going to get, that they strive, hopefully, to cut them fairly evenly. Another aspect of this is to design a system, whether it's a game, whether it's a justice system, where you don't know what your status is going to be entering the system. And if you operate with that veil of ignorance, you're more likely to get a system that is fair. And so the most pragmatic solution is to begin by saying, I don't know where I'm going to be in this system. I don't know if I'm going to be poor or rich. I don't know if I'm going to be black, white. I don't know if I'm, Hispanic, whatever. I don't know what my religious heritage is going to be or whether I'm going to come in with, it doesn't matter. So let me design a system that makes sure that no matter how I enter it, I have a fair shot.
But what you just said, I agree with what you said, but we're assuming now that you already have foreknowledge of that you're entering into reality. We create laws after we enter reality.
Hang on. This is not something that actually happens, okay? Nobody sat down and said, I'm going to create the justice system of the United States without knowing where I'm in it. It's a thought, It is a thought problem, an exercise in trying to determine what the most fair thing is going to be. We, who are already in the system, or in the process of creating the system, are looking at this saying, let's do it this way because this is demonstrably the most fair way.
Right. It's an ideal to strive for.
Okay, I was wondering, say you know where you are in the system, and you're so absolutely sure of yourself that you know that there's no way in the world that you can ever go back to being someone who could be taken advantage of in the system.
Okay.
Why should you create laws that should benefit everyone else?
Well, I don't know how you determined that there's no way for you to have any other status.
So I was saying, say for example, you're Bill Gates.
What?
For example, you're Bill Gates.
Okay. Bill Gates could be bankrupted tomorrow under the right circumstances.
Yep.
If the financial system collapses, he's just as broke as me.
But I'm not arguing just on his financial status. I'm arguing based on how much he's done, how many people he's helped. There's at least one person who would take him in. There's at least one person who would help him out.
Maybe not. But what the hell does that have to do with the system?
But it's based on the people he's helped out. He's acquired enough to at least survive for the rest of his life.
Well, if the financial system collapses, nobody's going to be able to afford to take him in anyway.
So you're saying that the financial system collapses, it collapses for everyone?
Yes, the financial system doesn't just collapse for Bill Gates. But the point, if you're asking, here's a better example that you might have wanted to use. I don't see any probability that I'm ever going to be African American, so why would I care about African Americans and making sure that they're treated fairly? That would have been a better example for you to use. However, the answer is, I don't know that, for example, if I'm just being self-centered and care about me and my offspring, what if I fall in love with somebody who's African American and I have kids that are in a unfair system? The echo is just driving me crazy. It's about recognizing that your situation isn't perfect, that it can change, that you can't predict the future, and about recognizing that fairness is something that benefits us all. Because if you're fair, if you privilege yourself in this one category, there may be other categories that you are not in the privileged class on. And so if instead you continue to push for a society that eliminates privilege uniformly, then instead of being in a world where you're privileged in this arena and extremely underprivileged in this arena, you now have worked towards a society where you have no benefits or drawback of privilege in all arenas. That's the thing. You tend to kind of narrow down to Bill Gates and financing and what he's done good, and I came up with the analogy, with being African American. The point is, life is a large, complex system, and the fact that you're privileged in one area doesn't mean you're going to be privileged in every area.
Yeah, but the thing I was trying to argue is, had it been life had more to it, like after you died, there was something else to it, then I would probably say, okay, it makes sense to make everything better for someone else. But since we already know that once we die, we're dead.
Okay.
Next generation
No.
There's no reason for it.
So are you saying that people have to have some kind of belief in an afterlife or some kind of punishment if they do wrong, or they won't be good in this life?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's no motivation. There should be no motivation to do good if we already know that once we die, well, we're not affected anymore by life.
We're a social species. Of course, we're going to do well. Do as much good as we can for each other.
So here's the thing: what you do. And this is, you're basically getting what's the point behind altruism or doing anything good or anything like that. And that's because you don't know what the future's going to bring, first of all. So if I see somebody on the side of the road with a flat tire and we are all of this mindset that there's no reason to help anybody else as long as we're the privileged one without the flat tire, then we all just drive by and we contribute to this idea that nobody in society should bother doing this. However, if we all recognize that, you know what, tomorrow I might be the one with the flat tire, and I'd rather live in a society where people understand that this could be them and exercise a little bit of empathy and compassion, pulling over, stop, help them change the tire, then I now live in a society where I am more likely to get help when I need it.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, thank you so very much for your time.
Sure, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
That was easy.
Yeah.
I wish I'd have gone there first.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the one problem with all of this, which I think I kind of touched on but didn't quite get to, is that we're very myopic. When everything's going our way, we don't tend to waste much time on the thoughts about people who aren't having everything go their way. But training yourself to see that, to think globally and act locally, to think in a variety of different contexts and act when you have that opportunity is the way to break that myopic vision. It's the way to realize that, oh, what I do has an effect on me, it has an effect on others, and what other people do has an effect on me. I don't live in a bubble. I live cooperatively with everybody. And while I may be, king for today, I might be peasant tomorrow. While I might have privilege and everything's going well and I'm healthy and I don't have any need for money, that doesn't mean that that's not going to happen in the future. And even if it doesn't ever happen, if your life just keeps better and better and better and better, contributing to a society that encourages empathy and compassion and charity and good works, still you benefit from. The reason, slavery was supposedly great for the slave owners. And I've said before, if you want to find out what was wrong with it, you talk to the slaves, because it wasn't necessarily great for them. But the truth is, slavery wasn't great for the slave owners either, because it contributed to a society that was in decline. That person that you have as a slave, or that person who you've decided to not care about, could be the one that grows up to cure the disease you're eventually going to get. Could be the one who creates the next technology or improvement to the world that makes your life better that you won't be able to benefit from because you were only concerned with yourself. I'm fine, don't get me wrong, I'm fine with selfishness. I'm fine with, I come first. I do. Me, my wife, my friends, my family, whatever, I tend to come first. I can break that rule. That's where we get to, altruism and generosity. I don't have to put myself first. When push comes to shove, I probably do put myself first. I think most people probably do. But the difference is, when I'm making a decision about whether or not I'm going to put myself first, I don't just look at this one little situation, what's best for me. Because what may be absolutely best for me in this one situation could have disastrous consequences that wind up horribly negative for me in the future. And it's seeing beyond that narrow little view of reality that we tend to live in. That's how we get to an understanding of fairness. It's how we get to doing good.
Well, and at some point you have to realize that fairness and goodwill toward other people, these are not zero-sum propositions. It's not like if I'm fair to someone that I've in some way lost something. Sure, I could privilege myself in society and reap greater benefits, but to what end? Like Matt said, if I'm starving the person who will eventually cure the disease I might get, I really haven't helped myself.
Yeah, it's we're all better off when we work to make all of us better off.
Yeah.
That's about as easy as we can get. How much time we got? Like 3 minutes or so?
And, quick reminder, no show next week.
Yes.
So don't forget, no show next week.
And Threadgill's today, but in 2 weeks we'll probably be going somewhere else, and we'll put it on the website and talk about it on the show in a couple weeks.
Yes.
Dave from Scranton, thanks for waiting.
Hey, I'm so glad to get to talk to you, brother.
Okay, you're kind of breaking up.
Oh, hello?
Hello?
Okay, Dave from Scranton, call back in 2 weeks, I guess. Sorry, you got dropped. How about we go to Dave in Central Oregon?
This is Central Oregon.
Hello?
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 Are you calling from Mars?
Hello, this is David in Central Oregon.
Hi, David.
Okay.
What do you got for us?
Hey, I wanted to talk about spirit and soul and the mind or thoughts being synonymous.
Okay, so
Last week you were talking about the spirit, and what do you think the spirit is?
I don't have any idea. I'm not convinced that it's anything.
Right, you don't have any idea. What I think, what people are talking about when they talk about spirit is their thoughts.
Well,
And that is synonymous with the soul.
Well, perhaps in some cases that might be what they're talking about. I don't see any reason to call it anything other than what it is, though.
Yeah, the Greek word for spirit is meaning breath
Sure.
of life, and
Which is a thought.
the Latin meaning of spirit of soul is breath, the breath of life.
Okay, how's that synonymous with thought then?
Because the mind, with its thought, being vain and arrogant, believes that it is what creates everything.
I don't think that's the understanding most people have when they talk about spirits and souls.
No, they think about it as something like ghosts, something that you can't see but is there.
Okay.
Well, some of them do. And the thing is, I can't know what someone thinks these words mean unless I ask them, which is why on this show we ask them, what do you mean when you say spirit? What do you mean when you say soul?
Okay.
That's the only way to find out what they actually mean.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go around asserting that, look, we have a word for mind, we have a word for thought. I don't see any justification for tagging on spirit or soul, and I'm not about to assume that that's what somebody means, because there's, as far as I can tell, the terms spirit and spirituality have so many different meanings that they've pretty much become meaningless.
Right.
But you had another question I want to get to before we're done.
Which
we have,
about the crop
we have like
circles.
30 seconds.
Yeah, what about crop circles? As far as we can, I gotta stop because they put the credits up. With regard to crop circles, as far as we know, they're all man-made.
Yeah.
The hoaxers have come out and said so. We've got no reason to think that there's anything supernatural or alien going on. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 weeks, or at least somebody will. I might not be here. Hey, Nichole.
Yeah.
Sorry we didn't get to you on the show. We ran out of time.
Oh, that's okay.
So I heard you had a genetic test and you're 44% Jewish.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's irritating because I get into this with my mother all the time. I come from a mixed-faith family. So my dad's Roman Catholic, my mom's Jewish. And all in all, I was raised with a very mild understanding of religion. Nothing was really pushed too heavily. But
Nichole?
Yeah?
So your dad's Roman Catholic and your mom's Jewish?
Yes.
Yeah, so under Jewish law, you're Jewish because your mom's Jewish.
Yeah.
Under Jewish law, but if I don't ascribe to Jewish law,
well,
then I don't follow the Old Testament. I don't believe in any of that.
Yeah, and so
then I got this genetic test done, and it says that I'm Jewish genetically, and I'm kind of, to me, Judaism is a faith, and I don't understand the difference between the faith and where that line gets drawn with Judaism between faith and race.
Okay, yeah, so there's like an ethnic group that's basically, Semitic people who identify as Jewish. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's separate from the religion. Okay, and so a DNA test can't tell you what your religion is. It can only tell you what your genetic background is.
Right.
So I think, I don't know that there's any way to convince your mom, because she's probably talking about it from, with only the perspective she's got, which is she's Jewish and her children are Jewish. And, even if you said, look, I'm only 44% Jewish, so shouldn't that mean that I'm 56% something else? To her, that doesn't make any difference. Because she's not interested in the genetic aspect of it. What's the sticking point here? What is it you're trying to avoid acknowledging that you're Jewish? Because Russell's Jewish.
Yeah.
And there's nothing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being Jewish, but my question is that line between faith and race, because my mom thinks of it as being the same as being black or being Asian. And I'm like, well, if I fill out a job application, there's no box that I check that says Jewish.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still, and she doesn't, her thing is she always says, if your father's people ever rise again, you're going to be, you're going to be considered Jewish. And I see what she's saying coming from that perspective, but I feel like this is just one, they're really good about my atheism in general, but this is one point that I'm like, I don't believe in Jewish law. I don't believe, I'm not even culturally Jewish.
Yeah, I'm really kind of baffled, because they're okay with your atheism. And one of their things is that if your father's people, if Jesus ever rises again, you'll be considered Jewish. Well, that wouldn't be true, for example, if you were a Messianic Jew. If you had a Jew that had converted to Christianity, you wouldn't be viewed in the same light anymore. So what she's talking about is a matter of what you're convinced of and what you believe, if she's going to go down that line. And your answer is, I don't believe either one of them.
Right.
Yeah. There may never be an easy solution to this, and without being overly stereotypical about Jewish mothers, if she's going to stick to this kind of hard line, I'm your mother, so you're Jewish thing, I can't really put myself in your shoes other than to presume that I'd say, okay, so what?
So would your position be that Judaism is also a race?
I don't consider it a race.
It's an ethnic group.
It's an ethnic, kind of cultural heritage thing. Matter of fact, there are people who would say that there are no races, that race is just this construct that we've lied to ourselves about. And I don't know how much I accept that, but...
Well, I do think that race is kind of a social construct, that in terms of a biological reality, that races don't exist.
Yeah, I can't wait for the day when everybody's like this same gorgeous brown color, and we've gotten rid of anything that would lead people down these rat tails.
But certainly there are cultural and ethnic groups that are distinct, even that have distinct genetic features. I mean, if you look at someone from like the Mediterranean region of Europe, you'll find a high prevalence of people who have I forget the name of the blood disorder, but it actually is protective from malaria. And it's different.
Sickle cell anemia.
No, it's not sickle cell. No? It's actually thalassemia.
Okay.
So it's a different mutation completely, but it also confers immunity, a partial immunity to malaria. So,
you live your life without identifying in any sense as a cultural Jew. You don't go to synagogue, you don't participate in bar mitzvahs and...
Never did it, no.
So is this what her real sticking point is, that she'd like you to?
I don't know. I think it might be part of it. Maybe she feels like I'm throwing away my heritage, but I don't even feel that she never forced me to go to temple. She never forced any of that on me. So I don't know why it would be an issue now, but maybe as she's getting older.
I tell you this, when it comes to throwing away your heritage and caring about your history and your ancestors and stuff, my wife and I have disagreed about the significance of this, because I couldn't possibly care any less about who my ancestors were or what they did. It may be a point of interest, I know some things about some of my ancestors, but I'm not beholden to them or their ideas, and it's nothing more to me than a curiosity. To other people, including many non-religious people, it's far more than a curiosity. It ties into their identity, and it's important to them. And if that's kind of the way your mom's going, obviously you do whatever you feel you need to do. But I know plenty of Jews who are atheists who still culturally identify as Jews in many other respects, and I certainly wouldn't fault any of them, and I know a lot of them are probably doing it just to make their family happy.
Right.
So, you love your mom, she loves you. Bicker and argue like you're supposed to, and, just be nice to each other.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, thank you very much for answering that. I really appreciate it. It's been kind of a bone of contention.
Great.
So.
Sure.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
That's it.
You're not going to do, is it David in Shelton, Washington? He was
Which one?
I think it was 4.
Is this David? Hello?
Hello? Maybe it's one of the other.
Hello? Hello?
Well, I guess.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, my name's David.
Hi, David. How are you?
Fine. I wanted to talk to you guys for the longest time and stuff like that, and I just have a lot on my mind and stuff like that. You know?
Unfortunately, the whole show's over, and there's not a show next week, so it's like 2 more weeks. But you could also always email tv@atheist-community.org, and that gets to us.
Okay, well, I just, I've wanted to talk to you for so long and stuff like that. I just have a lot on my mind, and there's a lot of things I wanted to ask you guys and stuff like that, and I have not gotten an answer over, and it's been bothering me so much.
Okay. Well, in addition,
the thing about it is, I actually have post-traumatic stress disorder. So the whole thing is, I've always been pondering why, what is going on in my head? Why do I have these thoughts of depression? Why is it that what is going on in my head? What is this whole suicidal thing? Why are people doing this? I don't know a lot about it, and I want to know all these answers about mental illness, depression, suicide, all this stuff. I'm kind of stuck in that dark area of things because I've dealt with this stuff for a long time and stuff. And it's just, I want to know about it. And it's been hitting me so bad. And, if there's a way you guys can get me information, is there some way I can find resources about this? Then I would be so happy because I have not gotten an answer by one person. I find, you know what I find on the internet is a bunch of wackos telling me that antidepressants are the worst thing ever, or they go in and they attack people who are therapists and they start saying that's pseudoscience, and I can't
So
you can't
David,
really what?
Yeah.
David, so like I said, the show's over. There won't be one for 2 weeks. You can also email us. But because your issue is important, look for the Secular Therapist Project because it's something it's a spinoff from the Recovering from Religion group that specifically deals with connecting people with therapists who are secular and vetted so that you're not likely to get religious mumbo-jumbo or pseudoscientific mumbo-jumbo. Because I'm not a therapist, I'm not a clinician, I can't, diagnose you over the phone. And I know that because I have lots of friends and I know lots of people who suffer with depression, manic, bipolar, manic depression, bunches of things. And there are lots of different possible treatments because there are lots of different causes. And I can't do anything more over the phone other than tell you, please, hit up Google and look for Secular Therapist Project, and they can hopefully put you in touch with maybe several therapists in your area.
I actually have a counselor and stuff, and I've been asking her these questions and stuff like that. But it's that she's been busy and stuff like that, and she just wants to talk about what's going on with me, and I just want to learn so much about this stuff,
Yeah. So
that's all I want to do is because it just puts somewhat at ease about everything going on in my head. At least puts some at ease, so that I understand because let me try to give you a background.
I can't
we
because
have to
they're
leave the
closing down the
studio.
studio. They're kicking us out.
Okay.
So send an email.
Yeah, send an email.
And get in touch with the Secular Therapist Project, and then call us back some other time. Let us know how you're doing, and maybe we can talk more.
Okay. Well, can I leave you a voicemail or something? Do you have a voicemail thing on your website?
If you go to our website, you can find the number for the voicemail. Don't call this number.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna go leave you guys a voicemail.
Yeah, you can leave a voicemail.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, David.
Right. Thanks.
Bye.